you need to be fully prepared. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and at the end of the story today, I'm going to recommend a structure for briefs. Not a template, but 4 elements that you always want to keep in mind. But this didn't start out as a quest for a briefing structure. I was actually looking for a personality test that I could give to general officers. Now, you probably know that I've had my fair share of unpleasant experiences when I misread the needs of my boss. And at that point in my career, I'd been exposed to personality tools like Myers-Briggs and business chemistry, so I thought it'd be really handy if I had some kind of tool like that I could use to assess general officers. The only problem with these kinds of personality tests, and trust me, there is a long list of them, is they rely on the subject tolerating probing questions. I mean, even mentalists who do cold reads are actually asking these probing questions. Well, you can probably guess the general officers do not like it when action officers start asking probing personality questions. You don't believe me? Try asking a general officer a question that tests their comprehension of conditional statements. I mean, it's like peeing on an electric fence. So how do you read somebody's personality if you're never going to ask them any questions? Well, in 2016, I had the good fortune to get selected for the Army War College Fellowship Program at MIT. Yeah, that MIT. And here's the thing. If you go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, you can find people researching anything. I talked to a guy who was seriously working on time travel. I talked to a woman who was studying violence in primates and had a surprisingly positive view of the United States military. I spent a lot of time talking to people on the front lines of virtual education. And then I found Bruce Arntzen. Now, when I met Bruce, he was the executive director for the Supply Chain Management program at MIT's Transportation and Logistics Center. And you might say, that doesn't sound very high-techy, but here's the thing. Supply chains, distribution networks, they are incredibly complex systems, and they are constantly evolving to respond to external factors. And unlike a NASA moon mission where all this complex system is under the control of a single organization, in supply chains you have literally tens of thousands of tiny organizations all competing against each other, trying to make a profit, trying to fit together. And that means that at the same time this supply chain is a complex system with these macro principles, it also relies immensely on the ability to communicate effectively to a wide variety of human beings. So what Bruce did is he built off of Aristotle's modes of persuasion: logos, ethos, and pathos. And he built a model that he called VELD, which stands for vision, ethics, logic, and details. For those of you who are interested in reading the article, and I'll put the link in the description, you'll notice that Bruce used the word emotions where I use the word ethics, and you'll see why in a second. In the VELD model, vision involves persuading people by painting a compelling picture of the future. It focuses on broad changes and paradigm shifts, all in order to address the big picture, global issues, and future possibilities. This approach arouses zeal and energy without getting bogged down in the minutiae of how that future state will be achieved. The ethics approach uses principle-based reasons and motivations for heading in a particular direction. One point that Bruce makes is that these ethical statements can be good ones or bad ones. On the good side, ethical statements often link to organizational values: loyalty, duty, integrity, taking care of soldiers, right soldier, right time, right place. On the bad side are principles of entitlement and ego, and they often are expressed as we deserve or they owe us. The logic approach attempts to persuade by appealing to reason, cause and effect, and there is usually a clear problem that it is attempting to overcome. And then you have details, which might seem weird as a persuasive approach, but I think we've all met people who wouldn't take the first step unless Every step of the journey had been clearly laid out from the very beginning. Now, remember that when I met Bruce, what I was actually looking for was a way to read a general officer or an SES without having to ask probing questions. And in fact, one of the things that Bruce had experimented with was a questionnaire to try to figure out what elements of the VELD model appealed to certain types of people. Personally, I don't think his findings were all that surprising because business leaders like vision and the front office staff, they like the ethics, and the engineers and architects, they like the logic, and the bureaucrats, they like the details. And this is why my journey for a non-invasive personality test turned into a study of briefing structure. See, even though there are patterns about the persuasive approaches that people respond best to, and individuals have their own preferences, there's no guarantee that those patterns or preferences are going to remain true in an actual brief. And so you have to be prepared to communicate using vision statements or ethics statements or logic or details at any moment. You might go to meet some visionary general only to discover that he has his ethics-based deputy with him and his logic-based chief of staff, and sitting over there on the couch is the detail-oriented action officer. And as each of these people asks their questions, you want to be able to engage them with the statements that are most compelling for them. Nowadays, when I build a brief, I always embed all of the elements of VELD into that brief. Now, I don't have a slide labeled vision, but I make sure that the vision is present in the brief. In fact, I think a lot of people are putting these 4 elements into their brief and not even being fully aware of it. A lot of times what you'll find is vision expressed as guidance from some strategy document or maybe commander's intent or a quote from some leader's speech. Sometimes with ethics, I don't even include it explicitly, but I am always ready for the person who says, "Why are we doing this?" Be able to tie your brief to an ethical concept that the organization prioritizes. For logic, I usually shoot for a single slide. Usually a slide that provides a clean framework for breaking down the tasks that have to be done. Something that shows how each piece fits together and makes it possible to digest the whole. And then when it comes to details, I always include them, but that does not mean that I've always worked them out completely. In fact, a lot of times I just put the details in backup. That way I can address them if I need to, I can show a willingness to dig into the details, and I can stimulate engagement at the action officer level to kind of work things out. Now there is one funny thing, and that is that a person who is interested in the details usually will tolerate the discussion about vision and ethics and logic in order to get to the details. But a person who's focused on the vision, they are not willing to sit through a discussion of all the details. And so what started out as a journey to understand the personalities of general officers and their needs ended up being sort of a framework for how to build a brief. And now, if you want to see how you can conduct a CIA lie detector test without hooking someone up to one of those machines, watch this video.